And we're back with our panel. Susan Page is the Washington bureau chief for USA Today. Ron Brownstein is senior editor at The Atlantic. Rehan Salam is the editor of the National Review and also a policy fellow at the National Review Institute. And Mark Leibovich is the chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine. I want to start with you, Susan. Donald Trump insulted George W. Bush. He got booed at 2 consecutive debates, got into a fight with the Pope, and was in a fight with Ted Cruz for a month of back and forth, and he still won South Carolina. Is that it? Is he going to get the nomination?
I think history is on his side. You wouldn't want to say at this point that it's his. You wouldn't want to say that he's won it, but I think the nomination is now his to lose, and we can't figure out a way in which he would manage to lose it, given the things he's done that haven't even cost him. You know, he won South Carolina by 10 points. He won New Hampshire by nearly 20 points. No Republican has ever won both those contests and failed to then get the nomination. And 2 of the 3 who did that won the White House.
Right. You know, I would say, as I've said since the fall, I think the Republican race can still be summarized in 2 sentences. Donald Trump has consolidated the blue-collar wing of the party, and the white-collar wing of the party remains fragmented. He won in South Carolina an incredible 42% of Republican voters without a college education, exactly the same number as he had in New Hampshire, and as much as Rubio and Cruz combined. He's less imposing among college-educated Republicans. He was only at 25% among them. He was only at low 20s in Iowa as well. But the problem, Cruz and Rubio have kind of a mirror image problem. Cruz's coalition is too narrow, overly dependent on evangelicals, and Rubio is too shallow. He's got a little bit of everything, but he's not dominant anywhere. And until one of them shows that they can broaden more effectively, you'd have to agree Trump is in the driver's seat.
Rehan, Marco Rubio made the case that it's now going to become about policy specifics with Donald Trump. People have been trying for a while to make that case. Do you think there's any chance that Rubio is right about that?
Well, my concern for Rubio is that if you're looking at those Trump voters, they're an important part of the coalition. And a lot of them think of themselves as moderates. So you'd think that they'd be flocking to a candidate like Rubio, and yet Rubio has been relying on this idea that the quote-unquote establishment lane is going to clear, and then he's going to kind of automatically win these voters over, and that hasn't happened. Now, on the other hand, you've got Ted Cruz, who has a very different problem. Ron mentioned Cruz's strength with evangelical voters. The truth is, however, when you look at South Carolina, there's an interesting split. When you're looking at evangelical voters who go to church once a week, Cruz does very well with those voters. But of course, there are actually not that many of those voters in the Southeast compared to Texas, Oklahoma, and the Great Plains states. Whereas if you look at people who identify as evangelical Christians but who are unchurched, those are the folks who are going to Trump. And that's a constituency no one else has been able to crack, including Marco Rubio.
Can I just add one other cut on the evangelicals real quick? If you look at with the evangelicals by education as well, Donald Trump won 44% of evangelicals in South Carolina without a college degree. He crushed Cruz among them. On the other side, Rubio narrowly beat Cruz among the evangelicals with a college degree.
So he's squeezed.
So he's getting squeezed from both sides, and especially as you look in the South, if Donald Trump can hold that 44%, anything like it, among blue-collar evangelicals who are really big in many of the southern border states, that Cruz wall will be overrun pretty quickly.
Mark, let's talk about the Cruz wall, because his argument is that he was going to do very well in those Super Tuesday states. He's now been in a protracted back and forth with Donald Trump for a month. Here's a guy who knows how to debate. He knows he has currency with those voters, and it hasn't worked so far.
Well, the reason it hasn't worked is just, frankly, numbers. I mean, it's just, people have, the words coalescing, consolidating. I mean, these long 2 words have been, very popular this morning. And the fact is, Donald Trump has his own consolidated base at this point. It crosses many demographics. It crosses, many, evangelicals. I mean, young voters, older voters. Rubio thinks that, the establishment will coalesce around me. Cruz seems to think that the evangelicals will flock to him. And until there's just 2 people in the race, which could happen, not for another 6 weeks, 2 months, there's not going to be a clear shot at Donald Trump.
And by that time, you still have a 3-way race. You're into big states that have winner-take-all primaries, which means Donald Trump, with 35% of the vote, could amass enough convention delegates to ensure his nomination.
Right, and I also think the only way this is going to change, I mean, as the very promising CBS intern Bob Schieffer was pointing out before, I mean, there was a sort of graciousness in pretty much everyone this morning, I thought. Maybe it's just a rest period. But I do think that to take the fight to Donald Trump, you have to take the fight to Donald Trump. I mean, Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz really have to open this thing up, really have to go after him, maybe harder than they have before, and that's how it's going to move.
I also think the policy specifics thesis, the problem with it is that Trump's whole point is that, look, I'm just going to make America great again. The specifics, let's leave that aside. He actually has some plans. He doesn't appear to have fully engaged with them all the time. Whereas if you're looking at Marco Rubio, there is one area where he has very detailed policy specifics on immigration, and he's moved sharply away from that position. And for months, it's been very clear the number of Republicans who want to increase immigration levels, that's 4% of self-identified Republicans. And you have all of these Republican candidates fighting over that little constituency. Rubio needed to do a better job of getting specific about exactly how and why his position had changed, and he failed to do that.
You know, and the fact is, the things where Trump has articulated a specific position, that's where his support is rooted. I mean, clearly part of it is that they like that he's an outsider, they like that he's a business guy, but if you look at the exit poll, 44% of the voters in South Carolina, a minority, supported deporting all undocumented immigrants. Trump had almost half of them. He had over 40% of those who supported the ban on Muslims. So he has established, as you said, he has a constituency that cuts across many traditional demographic boundaries, but I think is still rooted in this one new slice. For the first time, the blue-collar wing of the Republican Party is driving a candidate toward the nomination. The white-collar wing was really essential for McCain and Romney. We are seeing an internal power shift in the party if Trump can take this all the way to the nomination.
Susan, set the table for us for the next big Super Tuesday fight. What does that look like? It's bigger, lots of states at the same time. We've been focusing on little tiny states. Now it gets opened up.
So a dozen states, including Texas, that might be a state to watch. In the polling that we've seen Cruz ahead of Trump in Texas. What if Trump comes up and beats Cruz in Texas, in his home state? How does he stay in it? And 2 weeks after that, we've got Ohio. I think that would be a test to see if John Kasich manages to stay in the race until Ohio and win it there. At the moment, Trump is winning Ohio. When you look at the Super Tuesday states, you've got a bunch of them across the South. That's important. You've got a couple in other places. But it's really a contest that goes to the base of the Republican Party, which is a Southern base. And we'll see who can carry that.
Mark, usually people like to get behind a winner. In politics in Washington, we see them run and grab a hold of them. Donald Trump doesn't have any endorsements of the Senate or the Congress. Do you expect any of that to come?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if it does, I don't think it'll help or hurt. I mean, the fact that Marco Rubio is surrounding himself with so many endorsements and is trying to roll them out, periodically in the next few days, I don't think it matters. I think it's shown traditionally that it doesn't matter. I mean, one of the reasons Donald Trump has been such a standalone phenomenon is that populism, and this is still a very populist party, is celebrity in this day and age, and Donald Trump is a celebrity.
Rotten.
I was going to say that, just to underscore what Susan, and for Ted Cruz, I mean, the future really is now. I mean, the states that are coming up are the heavily evangelical, heavily blue-collar states, not only in the South, but in the Midwest. And if he cannot drive Donald Trump off of this beachhead that he's established, particularly with blue-collar evangelicals, which he's now won in both New Hampshire and in South Carolina, then you're looking at places like Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, but also Missouri, Ohio, Michigan to some extent, Illinois to some extent, Wisconsin later in the Midwest, where if Trump can hold those voters, there just isn't enough for Cruz, because Cruz is so weak, has been so weak among voters who are not evangelicals.
And yet Cruz has a lot of money. So Cruz is staying in this race, and I assume Rubio is staying in this race, and that is also good for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Rubio could, in theory, make a blue-collar pitch, going back to the policy specifics idea. If he actually said, look, this guy is a plutocrat charlatan, and I have a real agenda for working families. But the funny thing is that that's something he'd always teed up for a long time, and yet he actually never talks about it unless a very skilled debate moderator actually brings up, hey, here's your tax plan, here's what you plan to do for families. Now, whether or not that substantively works, that's a kind of message that could theoretically resonate with some working class voters. And why isn't he talking about it?
Here's the thing I don't understand, though. I mean, Rubio, the opening that's there is that Donald Trump faces more resistance in the white-collar side of the party. Rubio has actually now won college graduates in 2 of the first 3 races, but by tiny margins, not enough to really make a difference. It seems like there is a door open for him that he simply does not want to walk through, and instead is pitching himself more, trying to cannibalize the conservative support of Cruz and Trump, rather than veering more toward the lane that elected, I'm sorry to use that word, Mark, that elected John McCain and Mitt Romney.
But Mark, wouldn't Marco Rubio, to take Rehan's point, have to go right at Donald Trump? And isn't that the graveyard of candidacies?
It has been to this point, but I think that's his only option at this point. I mean, he does seem to, his style the last few weeks, and I think seems to be going forward, is to just sort of wait for things to coalesce around him. The endorsements, the establishment, which to this point has shown not to exist over and over and over again. But yes, I don't think that's his style or his inclination.
We got to go to the Democrats before we run out of here. Give me your take on what you think. Did Hillary Clinton do herself some good in Nevada, or is it where do you think things?
Well, I think she definitely did herself some good. What if she had lost in Nevada, a state that we expected her to win, that she won in 2008? So yes, a definite victory and a clear victory, unlike the very narrow one she had in Iowa. But unlike the Republicans who go to winner take all, the Democrats require proportional representation. That means I assume Bernie Sanders stays in this race, continues to get convention delegates, goes to the convention, even if she's got it wrapped up, the nomination wrapped up, presses his cause, which I think was his original agenda.
Yeah.
So it becomes just a message.
Well,
crusade,
yeah, potentially, but no, look, the good news for Bernie Sanders in Nevada is that his generational advantage that we saw among white young people in Iowa and New Hampshire extended to minority young people in Nevada. That augurs well for him. He lost, though, older minority voters by even more than he lost older white voters. And again, underreported fact, he's having trouble with Democrats. He only won 40% of self-identified Democrats, roughly, in Nevada, the same number as he won in Iowa. And as John McCain found in 2000, it is hard to win a party's nomination, ultimately, if you can't get people in that party to vote for you in sufficient numbers. So yes, he is a serious challenger. He's not just a wine track candidate. He's not just young people. He's running well with blue collar whites. But until he shows he can fully expand across the spectrum, especially into African Americans, really hard for him to get over the top.
Mark, if Susan's right and Sanders can stay in for a long time and stick with his message, doesn't that become, though, that he's constantly there at poking the bruise of Hillary Clinton, which is you can't bring in young voters. They were a part of the Obama coalition. That would be quite damaging to Hillary.
Yeah, I think that, look, well, first of all, I want to praise Ron's incredible specificity on demographics, which I find very intimidating to follow, and I think we all can applaud that. I would say that, look, that's a bruise that doesn't need poking. It's there. It's been proving to be there over and over and over again. And look, it's a problem for her. It was a problem for her 6 months ago. It's going to be a problem for her a year from now, or maybe not a year from now, but close to a year from now. So, look, he is a constant reminder. I think in some ways he remains the ideal opponent for her because he moves her left, and also he's probably not going to win.
But Mark, the only antidote for that problem for Hillary Clinton may be Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton may not provide positive momentum if she's the nominee for the Democratic coalition, but the negative kind of response to Trump.
Although we had a new poll out this week that said, what's your dominant reaction to these people's nomination? The dominant reaction of Americans to Hillary Clinton's nomination was scary. And that was also the dominant reaction to Donald Trump's nomination was scary. So just imagine a general election.
It's really worth noting that if you look at how liberal these Democratic primary electorates are today versus what they were like even 4 years ago, in a way the Sanders phenomenon is a reflection of the shrinking of the Democratic coalition, whereas Trump, for better or for worse, appears to be growing the Republican coalition at the margins in some ways. He's also repelling others. It's complicated, but that is one pattern that I found very striking between the two parties.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Nothing scary about it. Any of you all. I want to thank our panel, and we'll be right back. Yesterday, Washington paused to reflect on the life and work of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Some 3,000 people attended his funeral, including Vice President Biden and 10 of the 11 living Supreme Court justices. Among the mourners, Scalia's wife of 55 years, Maureen, and their 9 children and dozens of grandchildren. His son, Paul, a Catholic priest, led the services. Justice Scalia was 79 years old. That's it for us today. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.